What I am going to do is tell you a little bit about what's been going on at the center over the last year, because I think the center has made some great strides and changes here, both in our animal populations, our facilities. And I want to give you a quick update on some of the really positive things that have been going on here as we have advanced over this past year. There are some new folks in the audience, so I want to give you a very quick overview of the center resources, and then I'll step into some of the activities that are going on. And you're going to hear quite a bit more from the genetics group here today on some of the research that's going on in that group. ARS has national programs in 18 areas that range from crops to human nutrition, entomology, etc. And we have 4 of those national programs here at the center that include animal health, food safety, production, and environmental management. So we're quite a diverse resource for research beyond what I think many people just attribute to us as working in the area of animal production. Our budget is $22.6 million a year. This year we've generated $10 million in revenue, and our scientists can engage in the granting process, both from industry and from competitive grants through government agencies, et cetera. And we operated on about $2.2 million. We are a hybrid organization, obviously, with collaborations with the University of Nebraska. Half our workforce here, those that you see out taking care of our property and our animals, are, in fact, UNL employees. So we are tied at the hip, and it's a very worthwhile relationship. If you'd fly over us, this is what we look like. 34,000 acres, and 24,000 of those are devoted to grazing. You know what our neighbors would be doing with this property if they have it, and you can see that around our borders. A lot of irrigation. A lot of that has come from this Army Corps of Engineers project that we had here, and I'll give you a little bit of an update on that, and quite a farming operation. This year we'll expose 7,800 cows. I'll give you a little bit better view of how that's happening in the cattle industry. 2,400 ewes and 1,000 litters a year is what we typically produce here at the center. And we do have a feedlot that provides us the opportunity to house about 6,000 animals. The units that are working here, the areas that we do have research going on, genetics and animal health makes up one of our units here. The animal health group, in terms of cattle, is working a lot now in the area of bovine respiratory disease. You'll hear a little bit about that on the grant that Allison will be talking about in a little bit. And we have a very large program in BRD here as well. Food safety has been a program that has grown here over the years and is likely to continue to grow as interest starts to really focus on antimicrobial resistance and the role that plays in production agriculture as we go forward. Meat quality, nutrition, reproduction, and environmental management, as I mentioned earlier, is a component here that I'm not sure a lot of people know that we do here at the center. There have been a lot of changes that have taken place at the center since the last time many of you have visited us. And I think one of the biggest ones was the completion of the Army Corps of Engineers water project that they've been working on for 5 years. That project actually started the fall before I came here in 2010. So it's been a long, when you work with the Army Corps of Engineers, you'll appreciate arduous program that we had to go through with them. But the nice thing about it is that they did create for us about a $10 million beneficial reuse program here that included the development of grade control structures that help us with the erosion issues that might have come about from that water being released on our property, and a recharge of the aquifer. It's been very interesting to us because they built 10 grade control structures, and the recharge of the aquifer has been so great that most of the year water was not reaching the lake down south. So we are putting quite a bit of that back into the aquifer. We have 2 irrigation distribution sites that feed off of that, so we were able to shut down some of our own wells and utilize that water that they've already pumped in the reuse program. And so if you look at it, about the only water that's lost to this water district here is that's been lost to evaporation. And we feel really good about that project. And it's increased our farming capability and our diversity of resources tremendously. Grazing, when I first got here, we worked a lot on developing a grazing program here that went well into the winter. That was not typical here prior to that, to do a lot of dormant season grazing. But we decided to make that a real effort here at the center and focused on that. We needed water sites to distribute around the center, and we put in a plan that added 200 of those. We instituted a intensive grazing program, and we're getting very active now with the University of Nebraska in looking at cover crops and annual crop grazing. And in fact, we do have a project with UNL right now where they're looking at the impact of grazing in corn fields on subsequent production. It's an SRA grant that we're operating off of that. All of this grazing program was really targeted at increasing the number of cattle that we do have here at the center. And back in 2013, we had close to 7,000 animals. Actually, when I got here in 2010, it was around 6,500. We have increased the population to, as I said, we will be exposing 7,800 females this year, and the target is going to come out to be about 8,000 head. So we have upped the population here by about 25% to support the research that's going on here. And it wasn't a bad time to have more cattle from our perspective in terms of selling them into the market. One of the big projects that you will hear more about, I'm sure, is the breed diversity project, the germplasm evaluation project that goes on here. And I think one of the fun things about the tours, for those of you who may take one here later on or come back and visit us and take one, is if you come at certain times of the year, we have probably a microcosm of the beef industry out in a single pasture. The germplasm evaluation project right now is developing about 3,700 cows exposed of the 18 breeds represented here and crosses among those breeds. So it's kind of interesting to go by some of our pastures sometime to see all of the diversity that you can see with the eye as you drive by those pastures. But we have increased this population. This is about where it will asymptote to, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this population, both as it relates to heterosis, specific combining ability of breeds, as well as the genomics projects. We are sequencing all the AI bulls that come into this project, and sequencing is something I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about if you haven't already, simply because the efforts in Canada and the grants that are being run out of the University of Missouri, here at the Meat Animal Research Center, the costs of doing that have dropped dramatically, as most of you know, and we are generating a tremendous amount of data on the sequences of the animals that now determine the gene pool of the populations that you work to. It's data right now. We're collecting a lot of phenotypes along with that. The real challenge going forward is turning that data into information for you in terms of decisions. New tools are being developed. Jerry has created a new panel that's going to be released, I believe, in December, end of November, December, somewhere around there, which is really focused on functional variants. And this is a big step forward, going away from markers to functional variants, because one, it's targeting what we believe is the cause of genetic variation, and two, it gives us testable hypothesis opportunities if we want to look at genetics and how it interacts with management systems. We have another fairly large population here. It's about 1,000 animals, It was one where Gary Bennett had done quite a bit of work on marker-assisted selection in there, trying to increase the frequency of the different markers that had been associated with particular traits. As we move forward and look at these variant panels and understanding our sequence data, he's going to have a focus on selection to examine these loss-of-function genes and what impacts that would have on reproductive performance and other traits if you start eliminating them from a breeding population. And this is 4 populations of animals, about 2,500 each, that are the MARC 1, 2, and 3 composites, plus an Angus population that's there. The other populations that we have here are the 2 large commercial herds. And one of them, we've selected the MARC 2 to represent composite commercial animals. And there'll be about 2,000 animals in that. And an Angus commercial herd of about 1,000. And the Angus commercial herd, we're actually going to be bringing in AI sires, producing sons of those sires, sequencing those sires and genotyping their sons, and starting to look at some of the opportunities for genomic selection going into commercial herds as we develop that. We're doing that in the Angus population. If you drive around the center, and you've visited it before, you'll see we've got quite a few new facilities. We've renovated several of our barns. We've built remote working facilities to enhance our grazing program even more. We're developing a challenge facility for food safety, the ability to put animals in there and track how the various human pathogens that are in the food production animals, like Salmonella and E. coli, interact with those individuals, and that should be done here fairly soon. And we're modernizing our metabolism barn, as many of the intensive studies that need to be done going forward relative to animal use and feed efficiency get to be a bit more biological. And for those of you who know that pigs exist, like I found out when I got here, we built 2 new of 4 buildings that we're planning to do there. And I point this all out because mainly for myself, to look back and say, you know, this place is really evolving. It's moving forward. I think we're positioning it to be a facility that continues to do the kind of research that it has done over the last 50 years into the next 50 years. I want to highlight the food safety and BRD research a little bit. We're obviously interested in the human pathogens, and the reason for mentioning this is it ties into our genomics program as well, because the scientists working both in BRD and in food safety have developed a pipeline here that I think is second to none in terms of sequencing the genomes of these microbes that are important to us. And we have purchased the kind of equipment that does very well at sequencing these kinds of organisms, and our throughput has been absolutely tremendous. It's the opportunity to look at the variation in the genomes of those pathogens that cause human health issues, and the same organism that in other cases does not, and how it does it. And so we'll be looking at association studies of the phenotypes of those organisms, just like we do in our mammalian species. I think the next big step for the center, and one that I've really promoted and I'm hoping that we continue to develop, is this concept that this facility is just a gem of an opportunity to utilize the farming operation, the land operation, the understanding of the environment that goes into both crop and animal production, and actually study the center physical property. And we're doing a little bit of this by looking at the cover crops and crop residual grazing. Our environmental management group is looking at methods of using resistivity arrays to monitor lagoons, to make sure that they maintain their integrity, but also a tremendous opportunity to look at the entire environmental scope of issues like antimicrobial resistance, since we know it exists throughout the environment. And we've done things like participate in the NCBA sustainability study as well. Those kinds of activities put a new light on the resource that we have here at the center, I believe, to add more than just the opportunity to do research in production and food safety, but also to understand the entire environmental interaction. And I'll give you a perfect example of this, that a study that's just started here that I believe is going to be the kinds of studies that we look for going into the future. I showed you this map of the center, and for those of you who came in from the west, you probably went by a treatment plant that the Corps of Engineers built here, and that's where the water that's in the aquifer that was contaminated from when this was the Naval Ammunition Depot is being treated, and that water is then being released across the street from that treatment facility into a creek that traverses the Meat Animal Research Center. And it ends up in a lake down here where it's its final destination unless it gets so full that we have to release some water. Well, if you look at that, you see that that creek goes through farming area, it goes through pastures, there's cattle crossings there, and our scientists have developed a project now where they examine the water for its bacterial content and any resistance that's in those particular organisms being pulled up from the ground, and then they're going to study it as it goes through this entire operation and into the lake. And again, this is something that we have the opportunity to do here because of the resource that we have and the kind of activity that I think will be what we view as providing even more information to the agricultural community on top of all the great work these scientists have done over the years in production and in food safety. So with that, I welcome you to the center. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoy this symposium. I think it's well set up, and you've got some great speakers here after we get by the next one.